You should have left when you had
You
the
should have
chance.
left when you had the chance, Danielle said, her voice low and cold, her red lacquered nails resting on the marble foyer table like a woman claiming a throne. Mary did not look up from the tea she was pouring. I did think about leaving, she said quietly. Then I remembered the property is mine.
The property is mine.
The Whitmore estate sat at the end of Bellhaven Drive like a secret the neighborhood had agreed to keep. 12 bedrooms, 4 receiving rooms, a chandelier in the foyer that caught
Welcome back,
afternoon light
everyone.
and
Let us
scattered
go
it across
inside.
the walls like scattered diamonds. The kind of house that did not announce itself, it simply existed, certain of its own value, the way old money tends to be. Mary Whitmore had bought it on a Tuesday. She had signed the papers alone, in a lawyer's office on the 43rd floor of a building that did not have her name on it, in a city that did not yet know what she was building. She was 31 years old. She was 3 years into a marriage that was falling apart in the quiet, devastating way that only marriages between people who once loved each other can. And she had made a decision that would take 7 years to fully reveal itself. She had not told a single member of her husband's family. That Tuesday had become today. It was the kind of autumn afternoon that made wealthy people feel like they deserved everything they had. The oak trees lining the driveway had gone gold and amber, and the light fell across the front steps in long, warm ribbons. Mary had been expecting them. She had known for 3 days, because Jason, her estranged husband, had called to warn her, or to threaten her. With Jason, it was often hard to tell the difference. "My mother is coming to the house," he had said, with someone. "Don't make a scene." Mary had said nothing. She had simply called her housekeeper, arranged fresh tea, and gone to her study to finish reviewing a set of acquisition documents she had been putting off since Monday. The acquisition was for a hotel group in Dubai. It would take most of the afternoon. She was halfway through by the time she heard the cars on the gravel. Danielle Whitmore arrived first. She was 64 years old and moved through the world the way very rich women do when they have confused the attention of frightened people for genuine admiration. Behind her came her husband, Hunter, who had the appearance of a man who had once had opinions and had them steadily removed from him over 40 years of marriage. And between them, arm in arm with Jason, was a young woman in a cream silk dress that had cost more than some people's monthly rent. Her name, Mary would later learn, was Delphine. She was 26. She wore her hair in a sleek chignon that Danielle had probably arranged. She looked around the foyer the way people do when they are calculating what they would change about a space they believe will belong to them. "Well," Danielle said, loud enough to fill the marble entrance hall. "Here we are." She spread her arms in a gesture that suggested the house was already hers to offer. "Welcome to the Whitmore estate, darling. What do you think?" Delphine's eyes moved across the chandelier, the curved staircase, the arrangement of white peonies on the entry table, and she smiled the particular smile of someone who has just decided they deserve exactly this. "It's beautiful," she said, "a little old-fashioned in places, but nothing that can't be fixed." Mary walked out from the hallway carrying a tray. She wore no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back. She had on a cream blouse and dark trousers, and she moved through the room with the unhurried ease of someone who has been in a space so many times that they have stopped noticing how extraordinary it is. She set the tray on the table, lifted the teapot, and began to pour. "Tea?" she said pleasantly. Danielle's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here, Mary?" "Living here," Mary said. "Milk? If you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to protect you, stay with this story, because what happens next is for you. Let me know where you are watching from." The tour began 20 minutes later, because Danielle Whitmore had never in her life let discomfort interrupt her plans. She moved through the estate as though she had designed it herself, describing the provenance of art pieces she had never purchased, praising the imported Italian marble she had never ordered, pointing out the ceiling height of the East Wing Library with the confidence of an architect who had drawn the plans personally. "This is the original Moretti chandelier," she told Delphine, gesturing upward in the dining room. "Hunter's grandfather sourced it from Florence. Family heirloom. It's worth more than most people make in a lifetime." What Danielle did not know, what none of them knew, was that Mary had had the chandelier authenticated and insured under her own name 4 years ago. The policy was in a file in her study. Next to the deed, Delphine moved through each room with a decorator's eye and a sharp tongue. In the second-floor sitting room, she paused at the window and announced that the drapes were outdated. In the master suite, a room she entered without being invited, she said the color palette was sad and institutional. In the art gallery corridor, she wrinkled her nose at an original oil painting that had taken Mary 18 months to locate and acquire. "This one would have to go," she said, waving a hand. Mary, walking several steps behind the group, looked at the painting. It was a woman standing alone in a stormlit field, her face turned slightly away, her posture unbowed. Mary had bought it because it reminded her of herself. "It stays," she said quietly. Danielle turned. "Excuse me?" "The painting," Mary said. "It stays." A silence moved through the hallway. Hunter studied his shoes. Jason looked at the ceiling. Delphine looked at Mary the way people look at something that has briefly confused them before they decide it isn't worth their attention. Danielle smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You are a guest in this home, Mary, and guests do not dictate what stays and what goes. I suggest you remember that." Mary did not respond. She simply looked at Danielle with the calm, unhurried expression of someone who knows that the truth is already in motion, that it requires no acceleration, and that it will arrive exactly when she has arranged for it to arrive. And she had arranged for it to arrive at 4 o'clock. It was 3:45 when Danielle gathered everyone in the main sitting room and asked Mary to pack her bags. She did not phrase it as a request. She never did. She stood in the center of the room. Her room, she believed, her estate, her family's legacy, and she looked at Mary with the particular cruelty of someone who has mistaken possession for ownership for so long that they have forgotten the difference. "This is Jason's family home," she said. "It has always been Jason's family home, and it will be Jason's home with his new wife. You have until sunset." Mary picked up her tea. "Delphine deserves a real start," Danielle continued. "Not to be living in a house with a woman who couldn't hold her marriage together. It's undignified." "For whom?" Mary asked. "For the family," Danielle said. "For the Whitmore name." Mary set down her tea. She folded her hands in her lap, and then she said something that would end differently than Danielle expected. "There is a man coming at 4 o'clock, she said. "His name is Charles Atta. He is my attorney. I asked him to come today because I thought today might be the day this particular conversation happened. I would like everyone to stay. Sometimes the longest game is the most powerful one. Stay because this is exactly what patience looks like when it finally speaks." Charles Atta arrived at 4 o'clock precisely, which was the only way Charles Atta ever arrived anywhere. He was 60 years old, wore a charcoal suit that had been made for him by a tailor in Savile Row, and carried a leather briefcase that he had owned for 22 years. He had been Mary's attorney since she was 28 years old, and had just begun to understand the shape of what she wanted to build. He did not waste time. He sat down at the dining room table, opened his briefcase, and removed a set of documents sealed with the embossed logo of Vantage Holdings Group. Danielle looked at the logo. Then she looked at Mary. "What is this?" "These," Charles said, sliding the first document across the table, "are the updated deed records for the Whitmore estate at 14 Bellhaven Drive. Property purchased in full. No mortgage outstanding." He slid the second document. "And this is the Articles of Incorporation for Vantage Holdings Group, which is the sole legal owner of this estate and 17 adjacent properties in the Bellhaven corridor." Hunter leaned forward. "What does that have to do with Mary?" Charles looked at Hunter over his reading glasses with the gentle patience of a man who has delivered unwelcome news for 30 years and has made peace with the fact that people rarely receive it well. "Mrs. Mary Whitmore," he said, "is the founder and sole CEO of Vantage Holdings Group. She has been since the company's incorporation 7 years ago." He paused. "She owns the house." The room went very, very quiet. Delphine looked at Jason. Jason looked at the table. Hunter looked at Danielle. Danielle looked at Mary. Mary looked back. Her expression had not changed. She had the face of a woman who has been waiting a long time for a moment that did not require her to perform anything. Not triumph, not anger, not grief. Just the clean, uncluttered arrival of fact. 7 years ago, Danielle said slowly, "You've been here 7 years. Paying rent to yourself?" "No," Mary said. The family has been living here rent-free. What I did was purchase the estate's debt when the Whitmore portfolio nearly collapsed in 2017. Hunter, you remember 2017. You were 3 weeks from losing everything. The banks had already started proceedings. I stepped in through a holding company and absorbed the debt. No one asked questions because no one wanted to know the answers. She reached into the folder Charles had left in front of her and placed a document at the center of the table. Lease agreements, she said. Signed by you, Danielle, and you, Hunter, 3 years ago, when we restructured the arrangement. You signed them believing they were inheritance documents. Your own attorney advised you to sign. I would suggest a conversation with him about due diligence. As Maya Angelou once wrote, nothing will work unless you do. Mary had done the work quietly, methodically, without applause. And now it was speaking for her. Delphine stood up first. She looked at Jason with the expression of someone doing rapid calculations that were not going in the direction she had expected. You told me this was your family's estate, she said. You told me it had been in your family for generations. Jason opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I want to know, Delphine said, her voice very even, exactly what it is you actually own. The answer, which no one stated aloud, but which every person in the room arrived at simultaneously, was nothing. Jason owned a car he had financed and a watch he had not yet paid off. The estate, the art, the chandelier from Florence, the grounds, it all belonged to the woman they had tried to evict by sunset. Danielle's composure, which had held for 64 years, through an assortment of humiliations and reversals, finally broke. Not dramatically, not loudly. It broke the way expensive things break, with a sound so small you almost miss it, and then a gap that cannot be repaired. You can't do this, she said. This is our home. You have a lease agreement, Mary said gently, which I am choosing not to renew. The security team arrived at 4:35. Mary had arranged them the same Tuesday she had called Charles. They were discreet, professional, and moved through the estate with the quiet efficiency of people who had been briefed. By 5 o'clock, luggage was appearing on the front steps. By 5:15, it was beginning to rain. Danielle stood at the top of the driveway and said things that did not change anything. Hunter stood beside her and said nothing, which was perhaps more honest. Jason sat in his car with the engine running for 20 minutes before he drove away without looking back. Delphine had already called a car service. She would later, according to the housekeeper, tip generously and say very little. Mary stood in the foyer and watched through the tall windows as the last of the luggage was moved. She did not go to the door. She did not say anything else. She picked up her phone, opened the smart home application she had installed 3 years ago and never had occasion to use for this purpose, and changed the gate code. Then she changed the front door code. Then she changed the alarm system passcode. Then she went to the kitchen, made a fresh pot of tea, and returned to the acquisition documents she had left on her desk at 2:30. The hotel group in Dubai was a good investment. The numbers had been right the first time. She initialed the final page, closed the folder, and looked out at the estate grounds, where the rain was moving through the oak trees like something being slowly, carefully washed clean. The writer Paulo Coelho once said, "When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." But what he did not say, what the universe tends to leave out, is that wanting is not enough. You have to build it. You have to document it. You have to be patient enough to let the truth travel at its own speed. Mary Whitmore had been patient for 7 years. 7 years of setting the table for people who thought the table was theirs. 7 years of pouring tea in a home they believed they owned. 7 years of quiet, of paperwork, of compound interest and deed registrations and lease agreements, signed in good faith by people who had never bothered to read what they were signing. She had not done it to humiliate them. She had done it because the day she walked into that lawyer's office on the 43rd floor, she had made a decision about the kind of woman she was going to be. Not the kind who waits to be rescued, not the kind who lets fear make her small, the kind who builds quietly, patiently, without announcement, and trusts that the work will speak when the time comes. The time had come. The estate was quiet now. The chandelier from Florence caught the last of the evening light and scattered it across the marble floors in patterns that had nothing to do with who deserved them and everything to do with who had earned them. Mary Whitmore sat in her house. It was exactly what it had always been. Hers. If this story reminded you that patience is not weakness and silence is not surrender, leave a comment below and tell us, what would you have done? And if you want more stories about women who build empires quietly and collect receipts loudly, subscribe to Tales. We will be here every single week.
You should have left when you had the chance.